We, 1968, 69 school year, we got together with Hastings and Wesleyan, and they were having just as big a problem as we were having, schedule-wise. And we said, hey, we got to get something put together here and get some kind of a conference. So in the spring of '69, we had a meeting at Wesleyan between Doane, Wesleyan, and Hastings from the old NCC, and Concordia, Midland, Dana from the Tri-State Conference. And they were looking, the Tri-State was a pretty good league, but it was strung out all over South Dakota and Nebraska and Iowa. And it was just too expensive, getting too expensive for them to deal with. And so spring of '68, '69, we had a meeting and formulated the NIAC conference, Nebraska Intercollegiate Athletic Conference, which has now morphed into the GPAC. And it was strictly a men's league. We didn't have women's athletics at that point in time in any of the schools. And it was pre-Title IX, and so it was strictly a men's conference. And it was what was referred to as an athletic directors conference. And I can still hear Woody Greeno saying, he was a Wesleyan athletic director at that time, and he said, we got to keep these presidents out of it because they'll screw it up. And see, it's strictly an athletic conference. It's not a bunch of other stuff. And so it was a good start, and everybody pitched in and took a sport and set up rules for it, and then we all got together again and went through the whole thing. And I was involved with the rules for running the conference track and cross country meets, and we wrote them up and however we thought it should be, and brought it back to the clientele, and everybody voted on it, and we worked out the differences because we had to. I mean, it was just a matter of we weren't getting the kind of competition under the right circumstances without it. We were driven literally into that configuration. It was a conference of necessity as much as anything else. You know, we all recognize the fact that cost was a factor, and that scheduling was such a terrible problem. It was a period of change. The '60s was a real period of change for college in general, with the civil rights movement and the movement of minorities into predominantly what previously had been predominantly white colleges, and all of the tensions that created, and then the changes between private school, public school, the public schools, state schools started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the disparity between the cost of the private school and the cost of the state school started getting larger. And so that differentiation, I think, was there was some tension on that. It was a period of time when we went from primarily local recruiting to nationwide recruiting, literally. Um, a lot of our better kids came from um, out of state, and in fact, our first national champion was a kid named Fred Davis, and I don't know, do we have you got a picture of Davis that you can throw on there? Fred was from Marshall High School in Chicago, and he was an All-American football player and just a mountain of a man, 6'5" and 250, and he had muscles on top of muscles, and he was a great kid. He was our first, won the national NAIA indoor in '67 and '68, and he beat the reigning Olympic champion at that time, Al Feuerbach, from Emporia State, in one of those 2 years. And Davis was, he was really a fun kid to be around, had terrific form. I mean, I learned more just watching him throw than I knew anything about the throws. And he helped mentor some other pretty good throwers that we had about that time, Dan Tesser, and some of the kids. A funny story about Davis, at that when he graduated from Doane in spring of '68, I guess. At that time, to graduate from Doane, you had to pass a swimming test. There was every student, you couldn't graduate from Doane unless you could pass a swimming test. And Davis couldn't swim a lick. I mean, he was strictly a sinker. And he balked around and tried to work around it. And so finally, the last week of school, just before graduation, he came in the office. He said, "Coach, I got to pass this swimming test." And I said, "Well, you know what it is. You got to make one from one end of the pool to the other." Oh, he said, "I can do that." And I'm thinking to myself, how in the heck is he going to do this? Because I knew he couldn't swim. So it's okay. So we walked back to the pool, the swimming pool on the north end of Butler at that time, and he got down to his shorts, and I said, "Okay, Fred, you know what you got to do." "Yep." He walked over to the deep end, jumped in, sank like a rock to the bottom of the pool, got up, walked the length of that swimming pool. He said, he touched the other end. He said, "See, I made it from one end to the other." And I said, "Fred, I'm not going to argue with you." And I signed off on it, and he graduated. It was Fred was a great athlete and a great person, and went on to be the head of a school in Chicago for disadvantaged young people, and was there for, I don't know, 25 years or more. But you know, and Davis has been characterized as one of our greatest football players, and rightly so. He had one on. I played a little bit with the Chicago Bears, about maybe 2 or 3 years. But he probably wasn't if you judge football talent by the number of years that they play in the NFL, our best football athlete was a kid named Kevin Hunt. Played 8 years in the NFL with Houston and New Orleans. And Kevin was a pure walk-on. I'll never forget the day he walked into Papek's office. We were sitting in there discussing something, and here comes this guy, and he fills the doorway, literally. I mean, this guy is 6'5", and he must be 270. And just built like a Greek god. And he said, I'd like to see Mr. Papek. And so Al said, yeah, well, what do you need? And he said, I'd like to come out for football if it's not too late. This is after school had started. And said I played a little football in Connecticut, I think, as New Hampshire was where he's from. And Al said, well, yeah, it's not too late to come out. And he anchored our defensive line. He was a heck of a player, and strictly a walk-on. Didn't get one dime in scholarship money, and was really, his longevity in the NFL was probably the best we've had, of all of our people. The latter part of the 60s was part of this 38 in a row thing with the football team, and so that's everybody got kind of wrapped up in that, and it was kind of an exciting time. One thing about that time frame, it was never boring, because you were always scrambling trying to keep up with whatever was going on, and there was always something new and different that was happening, and we started in the new conference, the NIAC, the NIAC, in the fall of '69, and we won the very first championship that was ever given by the NIAC in cross country. It was the first sport to have a NIAC championship, and we won it. And I think we might have won both the track meets that year too. But it was the beginning of some real stability, I think. The NIAC gave us some important stability in scheduling and in recruiting and that kind of thing, and local coverage, news coverage, and allowed us to maintain the traditional rivalries with Hastings and Wesleyan. That was, I think, key to that whole thing.